By the way, one last thing I want to share with you about Pesach is that remember that only 20% of the Jewish people came out of Egypt. Do you know that? Do you know that 80% of the Jewish people died in Egypt? Heaven help us. We don't talk about this that much. It says 80% of the Jewish people died during the plague of darkness, when the Egyptians were experiencing the 9th plague. When they were dying, they were trapped for 7 days, a whole week. They were trapped in darkness. They couldn't move. 80% of the Jewish people died so that the remaining 20% could bury them and the Egyptians wouldn't be the wiser. Why did they die? Because they did not believe in the actual redemption. Can you believe that? Can you imagine? 80% of the Jewish people in Egypt during the plagues of Moses, the frogs and the blood and the locusts and the wild beasts and the boils, not 8 plagues have already taken place. And the vast majority of Jewish people, 4 out of 5 people, walking around and saying, you believe in this redemption stuff? We're going to stay here forever. That's what happened in Egypt. And this is a beautiful topic to talk about at your Seder table this year, to make your Seder an irrelevant Seder. How can I break out of my Egypt? How can I break out of my inability to trust? How can I break out of my brain, which doesn't allow me to trust, or my heart, and say, yes, we can. This is a change we can believe in. To answer your question, Andy, the source that the 80% died in Egypt is as follows. At the opening of the Parsha of Beshalach, Parshas Beshalach is the portion where they actually left Egypt. That's the one in the Song of the Sea. The opening words is, Vayihi Beshalach Paro Yasam V'nacham Lekim Derech HaShem Yirevu Ki Amar Li. It says Vachamushim Alu Bnei Yisrael Meretz Yisrael. It says the second verse in that portion, Vachamushim, and armed came the Jewish people out of Egypt. Chamushim, the word chamushim means armed. Today, if you're carrying a gun, you're chamush, you're armed. But another meaning of why would they need to be armed? Like, what's the reason that they need to be armed? So the Talmud explains to us the word chamushim also means 1/5. They were 1/5 that came out of Egypt. That is the origin. Rashi and the Talmud all bring it down to say 20% of the Jews only came out of Egypt because 80% stayed behind. Why did they stay behind? Why did they die in Egypt? Because they didn't believe in the redemption. Those that didn't believe in the redemption didn't experience the redemption. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy. They didn't believe it was going to happen. Guess what? It didn't happen. And those that believed that it will happen, it did happen. In fulfillment of what we say, if you say you can, or if you say you can't, you're right. Whether you say you can, or whether you say you cannot, you are right. And today, by the way, it says in the Talmud Sanhedrin 97 something, it says, Talmud Sanhedrin, that every Jew will experience the redemption from this exile with Mashiach, except someone who doesn't believe in the redemption. If you don't believe in the redemption, then you won't experience it, just like it was in Egypt. If you trust in God, you'll experience God's blessing. If you don't trust in God because you're so sophisticated, or you're too smart to believe in God, if you don't allow yourself to believe, and remember the yarmulke is belief, it's above the brain, it's higher than your rational understanding. That's belief and trust begins where wisdom ends. It's actually above wisdom. That's why the yarmulke is on top of our head. Today I see people wearing yarmulkes over their mouth. Unbelievable. You couldn't get them to put a yarmulke on their head for all these years. Suddenly comes this little tiny coronavirus and they're wearing yarmulkes all over their heads, but in the wrong place of their heads. They're wearing it over their mouths now. The yarmulke is supposed to be on top of your brain, not on top of your face, because it's higher than intellect. Trusting in God begins where intellect ends. It is higher, not lower than wisdom. It's higher than wisdom. And that's why, just like the Jews that died in Egypt, those that didn't believe in God, that didn't trust in God, were not redeemed. So too, those that did trust in God, the doctrine of blind trust. They didn't say, well, God is not great enough to overwhelm Pharaoh. God doesn't have the power to overwhelm Pharaoh. Their trust was blind. They said, we don't care how he's going to do it. Well, there's a sea in front of us. There's a desert in front of us. How are we going to get out of this? That's the plan. No way. Most of the Jews said it's not happening. and a minority of Jews refused to make those calculations. And they said, we have blind trust in Almighty God, that He knows what He's doing and He's going to make this happen. It was that blind trust that served as the vehicle. It was that blind trust that served as the vehicle that for all Jews, even those who were not worthy. I see my battery is dying. I'm just going to is that. Let's discuss this at the Passover Seder. Trust the doctrine of blind trust. We spent so many time over the past 2 weeks or so that we spent so much time here learning about this concept. Let's apply this concept at our Passover Seder. I'm just going to plug in my computer, guys. Just give me a quick second. Battery back on. But guys, I just want to explain to you. I want to make sure we leave you with this concept that the Seder is all about the doctrine of trust. That's what it is. It was about the majority of Jewish people who were too intellectual to believe, to allow themselves to believe, even after they saw the 8 plagues. And Moses, if Moses couldn't convince them to have trust in God, how am I going to do this? Let's learn the lessons of our history. That God has pulled through against all odds. I know we've got questions, and we're going to ask Him all those questions when Mashiach comes. But you know what? We don't have to understand everything. Trust begins with faith, where intellect ends.